Hey guys, Deconstructing the Narrative is a brand new feature that I'm toying around with on my channel, and I need your help on deciding on if it's even interesting enough to keep on doing. And the way you can help is to make sure that you like this video, comment down below on what you thought of the video, and of course you could always hit subscribe to be notified when I come out with other videos. The idea behind the series is a pretty simple one. You take a movie, any movie, and you break it down to its bare bones, its very foundation, its core into what makes it a movie in the first place. In layman's terms, that's the story, that's the idea, because a seed is planted and from that seed blooms a tree, and either that tree is full and glorious and complex or it's kind of weird looking. My mission is to look at that seed specifically, look at that idea, look at that story. Before a movie is even made, before it's being picked up by anybody, there's a story put into place. Is that story worthwhile, or could they have worked on it a little bit longer? Let's get into it. The first movie that I'm deconstructing is Captain Marvel, and before I start,
spoiler warning.
In order to actually look at the movie as a whole, to look at the concepts that make the story either work or not work, I have to spoil some things. You've been warned. We start with a seed, something that everybody in the movie has perspective on, has an issue with either in a beneficial way or a problematic way. Weirdly enough, this was the hardest thing to figure out with Captain Marvel. I don't even know if I got it right or not, but the only thing that I could come up with that everybody seems to have a perspective on is Captain Marvel's humanity. The problem comes from the imbalance, because every movie needs to have some kind of state of imbalance. It needs to feel like something's wrong, something's out of place, and the only thing that actually feels like it's out of place is Carol's mind. But that's not actually the imbalance the movie faces, because not everybody feels it, only she does. A well-done narrative has an imbalance that affects everyone, and only the protagonist goes after resolving it. So the closest thing that actually comes to mind is her humanity. She feels the imbalance through her amnesia. She's the only one that feels that. The Skrulls feel the imbalance because they have no home, they're looking for a home, they're getting hunted at the same time, and that's an imbalance for them. It's not normal. Nick Fury feels an imbalance just because he kind of wants to close the case that he's working on. So everybody's feeling all of these different imbalances, and what they basically need is for Captain Marvel to get her crap together, get her memories back so that she can fix everything for everyone. Does that make sense, or am I being confusing? Because this movie kind of is confusing. Now, even though everybody provides perspective on her humanity, the fact that nobody can really decide on what's most important kind of makes this film immediately feel a bit convoluted. Part of the point is to give the audience a sense of false narrative. You have the Kree, who are lying to Captain Marvel, though you don't know about that yet. You have the misunderstood deception of the Skrulls. Ready in Captain... Stay. You already had a jumbled up mess of memories that Captain Marvel was already dealing with. Focusing on one central thing in this movie was always going to be difficult, which doesn't bode well for the rest of this analysis. I'm going to give the central issue 1 out of 2 possible stars. Next, we ask 2 questions. Both of them deal with who the protagonist is and how they're going to resolve the issue. So who's the protagonist? Who's going to work to resolve the issue? Obviously, it's Captain Marvel. I don't think anybody will argue with that. The next question is, how will they work to resolve the issue? Well, the problem here is they don't know it's an issue yet. She never really thought her humanity was in question until probably the latter half of the movie. Instead, what she's working on solving is the Skrull problem, which actually isn't a problem. So in general, with solving the initial conflict that I talked about, she doesn't have a plan of action because she doesn't know it exists until later on in the movie. This once again creates a little bit of a false narrative. 1 out of 2 possible stars. If I break my camera, I swear to God. Next, we look at the main character and we decide on if the protagonist is the same thing, because it's not always the same thing. In this case, it is. It's a Marvel movie. What do you expect? They are a hero, which is a combination of protagonist and main character. The perspective that the main character provides is a personal arc. As Nick Fury would like to put it in the movie, she has a personal stake in the case. A majority of this movie is about her personal stake in the movie. It's about her amnesia. It's about figuring out who she is as a person. That I can get on board with. This makes the most sense. The movie seems to revolve around her story, which doesn't work as a whole, but it does work for her personal arc. As far as main characters go and their connection to the overall story, this is actually pretty strong. I will give this 2 out of 2 possible stars. Next, you're looking at the influence character. What is the influence character? The influence character is something that any good narrative has, and if it doesn't have one, then there's no real resolve, which I'll get to in a minute. But the influence character is somebody that shows up early in the movie, stays throughout, and challenges the main character on what path they should take. A good way to put it is that the main character has a worldview. They see the world in a specific light. The influence character, on the other hand, sees the world in a different light, and their role, their job, is to influence the main character that their worldview is wrong and they should see it their way. They could be a good guy, they could be a bad guy, it doesn't really matter, the role's the same. There's actually 3 influence characters in this movie, it doesn't have to be one. They are Nick Fury, her best pilot friend, and the leader of the Skrulls. They all do the same thing. Their role is basically to help Captain Marvel realize what being human and having humanity is all about, which is in sharp contrast to the Kree, who are all against emotion and humanity. So the influence characters in this case are actually really good. They're very thought out. They help her become the person we know her to be, which in the end means that her resolve changed. Her worldview changed to theirs. So the influence character, also 2 out of 2 possible stars. Next, we look at the antagonist. What is an antagonist? An antagonist is somebody who is diametrically opposed to the protagonist's plan. So if the protagonist's goal is to gain humanity back, then the antagonist's goal is to stop them from doing that. The only character that fits that description are the Kree, or specifically Jude Law's character. From the very beginning, his character is belittling her through the guise of tutoring so that he can keep controlling her. So he fits the literary definition of an antagonist, so he gets 2 out of 2 possible stars. So we looked at the issue at hand, we looked at the protagonist, we looked at the main character, we looked at the influence character, and we looked at the antagonist, all of which, if they work together seamlessly, can create a really good narrative. There's a problem with the foundation of the movie, with the seed, with the idea, the initial impact of the film. It's a little bit confusing, it's a little bit convoluted, and it shouldn't be, but it is. Everything else actually is done well, but it's hard not to realize that the movie is confusing because of those first 2 problems. So the narrative structure is actually rated 8 out of 10. It's not a bad score at all, it just has a weak foundation. Guys, tell me what you thought of Captain Marvel in the comments down below. And for YouTube, you know you can subscribe to me. Hit that like button, hit the bell to be notified when I come out with my next video. Peace out.